Bob, thank you for coming in. We haven't done anything like this, and it's fun to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm the guinea pig, I guess, so they're trying this new program out. But happy to be here. I'm Bob Knakal. I am a real estate broker. I've been selling buildings in New York for 40 years. For 26 of those years, had my own firm, Massey Knakal, which we sold to Cushman & Wakefield in 2014. And spent 3.5 years at Cushman as chairman of New York Investment Sales. I went to JLL. I was there for 5.5 years as chairman of New York Investment Sales, and now I started my own business again, getting back to my entrepreneurial roots. BKREA, which is capital markets and investment sales firm here in New York.
We're starting something out here. We're calling it Knakal in 60. We're going to ask you some quick questions in 60 seconds. Favorite restaurant in New York City?
Favorite French restaurant, Margarelle on 63rd Street, fantastic. And favorite Italian is Come Prima, Madison and 72nd.
Awesome. Favorite musician?
I love smooth jazz, so I love Joe Sample, Lonnie Liston Smith, Gary Taylor, David Benoit, Boney James, bunch of the smooth jazz guys.
Most memorable deal you've done?
Most memorable one is always the last one. And then my favorite is always the next one.
Is it just most memorable because your memory isn't good, so you don't remember the old ones? Or?
No, you know what? I have to tell you something, and the guys at the office will tell you this. I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but Ed, give me an address for a building I sold in 1987, and I'll tell you all the details about that deal.
Nice. All right. Well, if somebody can pull up a deal from 1987, let's put them to the test later on. Favorite sports team?
Well, absolutely New York Rangers, and right up there are the New York Yankees. Big New York sports guy.
All right. Well, I'm a Philly sports guy, but we're in New York, so I'm not going to hold it against you. Favorite building in New York City?
It has to be the Chrysler Building. You know, it is William Van Allen designed an unbelievable building. I love the story behind it. He had an ex-partner that was building a building that was going to be the tallest building in New York. So Van Allen surreptitiously developed the spire inside the building and then brought the spire out after the partner had finished his building, and then he had the tallest building in New York. So, but I think architecturally it's just beautiful.
And that didn't last very long anyway, because I think then the Empire State Building was shortly thereafter, right? So it was very, very short-lived, the tallest building in New York. Right. If you could meet any celebrity, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's a tie. I would love to spend a night on the town in New York with Babe Ruth. And I'd love to spend a night on the town in Las Vegas with Frank Sinatra.
If you weren't a top broker in New York, what would you be?
I've never given consideration to doing anything else. I can't imagine what it would be.
Except you accidentally made it into brokerage, right?
Completely by accident.
We'll get into that. Okay, biggest fear?
Two fears, nuclear war and circus carnies. Small hands, smell like cabbage.
Which one's scarier?
No, that's an Austin Powers joke. Come on. No. Biggest fear is, I guess, fear of failure.
Biggest motivation?
Success.
Best piece of advice you've received?
Steve Siegel told me very early on in my career, read everything you possibly can about the business that you're in. And I've always tried to do that, and I think it served me really well.
What's your favorite thing to read?
Favorite thing to read are books that lead to, I think, success or probability of success in any sales business. And I think that there actually should be a curriculum in college about this. You know, most of the stuff we learn in college you don't apply in your life, but things like persuasion, negotiating, human behavior, likability, you know, the whole Dale Carnegie, you know, winning friends, influencing people. Those are the things that actually there should be a whole curriculum in college about, because I think those things, if you're dealing with people, and almost every job in the world you're dealing with people, I think those skills will help you excel and succeed more than anything else.
I totally agree. And when I chat with kids in college, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, you want to be a lawyer? Well, who are the most successful lawyers? The partners. What do you have to do to be partner? Bring in business. What's bringing in business? Selling, right? I mean, there's like no profession, even if you're not in sales, where the top people who perform in that profession are not the best salespeople. Interestingly, I mean, we both have somewhat similar backgrounds, and then I came from brokerage, but I only did it for about 5.5 years. And I was mostly on the leasing side. Obviously, you've been in brokerage for a little bit longer than that. For me, having started CompStak, I started CompStak because I saw a problem in brokerage. I saw a problem in the way we were sharing data, and the fact that nobody was compiling the kind of data that we were using every day in a comprehensive way. It seemed kind of silly, right? I'm curious, what has made you tick in brokerage? What has made you want to continue in it and grow in it? And then we'll talk more about data too.
Yeah, well, Michael, I think what makes me continue in it, and I did have a period of introspection after we sold the business. We sold the business for $100 million. It was a life-changing thing. And so I was under contract at Cushman, so I had to keep brokering, but I thought to myself, okay, what do you really want to do now? Do you want to just, phone it in for a couple of years and then hit the beach? Do you want to start buying property? And it occurred to me that I truly enjoyed being a broker. And so I decided to keep doing it, and people ask me why, what is it about it? And I think it's interesting how people talk about kids on their cell phone today and how the cell phone gives them a dopamine rush all the time, and so they get addicted to it. And I think in the same way, brokerage business kind of provides that same type of frequent rush that you get from finding out a client wants to sell a building, and then giving the pitch and finding out you were awarded the building, and then you're negotiating and you reach a meeting of the mind on all the points, and that's a rush, and then you get the contract signed, that's a rush, and then you close the deal, and that's a rush. So there's a lot of winning involved in the brokerage business, and I think that's somewhat addictive.
I similarly enjoyed that about brokerage, but on the flip side, of course, there's a lot of losing too. And there's more losing in brokerage than there is winning. I mean, let's face it, right? You lose more deals than you win. Most people, maybe not you, most people, don't win every pitch that they make. The biggest frustration that I had as a broker was that my success was not directly correlated to my effort, right? You can work really, really hard. You can do the best work you've ever done on a deal, and your client can just decide, you know what? Our priorities have changed. We're not going to move forward on this, right?
Well, it's a combination of perspective and expectation, and I think nobody wins all the time. So I think you have to understand what your probability of success is, and then do everything you can to increase that probability. Now, if you look at the Manhattan market, for instance, south of 96th Street, there's 27,649 buildings. The average turnover rate of that stock of buildings over the last 40 years has been 2.6%. The highest it ever was 3.4% in 2012. The lowest it ever was 1.2% in 2009. But I know the long-term average is 2.6%. If you assume half the stuff that goes on the market actually trades, that means at any one time 5% of the stock is on the market. So if I'm making prospecting calls and I'm calling 20 owners, I'm expecting 1 out of 20 to be positive. So if I get hung up on 19 times in a row, I feel great because the probability is very, very high the next one's going to be successful. So I think it's a matter of understanding what your probability of success is, coming to terms with the fact that you're not going to win all the time and that things are out of your control. You can't control everything. But if you do the fundamental basic things, keep focused on continually prospecting to keep things going through the pipeline very consistently, then when you have those situations where you did everything you possibly could do and the client just says no, you have to chalk it up to you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but just understand your probability of success and do everything you can to increase that probability.
I think it's important, I think, for people to hear too right now. I'm sure there's people in the brokerage business that'll watch this, and I lived through the great financial crisis, so as a broker, and saw a lot of people leave the business during that time. There's a lot of people who've left the business, in the last couple of years similarly, and I'm sure that it's helpful to kind of hear that perspective.
Yeah, well, that happens. That happens in every downturn, and so I think I said it's perspective and understanding the business, and to realize that doing these fundamental things, and we call it blocking and tackling. You do those fundamental things over and over and over again, increases the likelihood you will at some point succeed. It's kind of like the stonecutter's creed, which is pound the rock. Right? So the stonecutter comes in, sits down in front of a big block of stone, takes a mallet and whacks the thing 99 times, nothing has happened. And the 100th time, boom, the rock splits in half. And to the casual observer, they say, oh, well, that 100th one must have been different. He must have hit it harder, must have been a different angle, maybe had a different mallet. But the stonecutter knows, no, it's the 99 that came before it that made that 100th one work. In the same way in the brokerage business, we do all these things to try to attain top-of-mind status, with our clients. And you have to do market presence things to make that happen. That's making your prospecting calls, sending out emails, sending out texts, sending out hard mail, speaking in public, going to networking events, doing all the types of things that get you out there to become known. And if you keep doing these fundamental, somewhat unglamorous things over and over and over again, eventually it's going to work. There's no way it won't work if you just keep at it. And I think, unfortunately, during tough times, a lot of folks just give up because they don't see the immediate results. They've hit the rock 92 times and they say, no more, I'm out. But you keep going, eventually the rock will split in half.
Yeah. We were going to do this in the map room, but it turns out that since you started your firm, you've made it your office temporarily, and so it's jam-packed with people, so it was going to be too noisy to do it in the map room. So we're in the CompStak office here, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the map room, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to visit.
Sure, well, we'd love to have you over. And yeah, the map room, and we're in the beautiful conference room here. The map room is about 2/3 of the size of this room. And it started based on a frustration that I had. And for about 10 years, I wanted to get out and actually do a physical count of buildings under construction because I sell a lot of land, our firm sells a lot of land, and in order to evaluate land properly, you need to know what the comp set looks like. What else is being developed, what else is coming online, what is the competitive landscape going to look like when this to-be-sold piece of land will be developed and have its product come to market. And in New York City, there is a fairly good pipeline of condo supply, but every brokerage firm has a different number. One big firm will say it's 9,000 units, one will say 6,000, and it's because when do you start counting a building? When do you stop counting a building? Do you include every building? Is it only buildings of a certain type and size? And I always said to my end, virtually nothing on rental apartments, hotels, office space, etc. So I said, if I'm out standing in front of a building that's being built, I know it's being built. So there has to be a way to do this. So during the pandemic, I came into the city. I was up at the country house. Left the city in a hurry, came back needing some stuff, and the city was a ghost town. Every store was closed. There were no cars on the street. And I said, if I'm ever going to go out and walk around the city and drive around the city, now's the perfect time to do it. There's no traffic. So spent about 4 months, 220 hours in the field with Sanborn maps, highlighting different colors of things under construction, things that had been demoed, obvious development sites, potential assemblage sites.
Just you alone, or do you?
No, I always had one of my colleagues with me who would basically drive the car. We'd park it in the middle of the street, get out, walk around for a half hour, go drive to another spot, walk around. Ended up doing the whole city. It was a fascinating thing. then I started, without intention of creating a big map, I started taping a couple of sections together to see what was happening in this neighborhood, what's happening in that neighborhood. Before you know it, I have this map that's 24 feet long and 10 feet wide. Started carrying it around to clients' offices, and rarely did anybody have a conference table big enough for this thing. And then I was going to a client's office one day, and it started to rain, the map got wet, and I'm like, heck with this, I need a permanent home for this thing. I asked JLL if they could accommodate me. They didn't have the space, so I just rented space, and I created the map room, and you know, I was fired on February 14th at about 10:05. At 10:15, I was in the map room making calls, didn't miss a beat. And I had actually been working in the map room for about 9 months, 10 months before going there full time. And I was in the JLL offices Monday and Friday, and at the map room Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But now it's, you know, it's about 600 square feet. It's a little tight. We've got about a dozen people now.
So, just 2 people gathering all this data, and then was it all written down on the maps, or do you store it in a database separately that references the map?
We color-coded the map, came back, and followed up with thousands of hours of research. Looking at every site, getting details on every property that was under construction. So now our development pipeline's down to the square inch for the 5 main buckets we have: residential, rental, condo, hotel, office, and a miscellaneous bucket for education, healthcare, buildings that don't fit into the first 4 buckets. Then we doing a comp study of land sales going all the way back to 1984. We've since we did the field inspection, we've been tracking every demolition permit, foundation permit, building permit that the city has issued, so we've kept on top of it.
So let me ask you, so the city obviously records the permits. They've got sites like Acris and Oasis and various resources from the city to find a lot of this information. What's the kind of information that you're getting walking the streets, looking at these buildings or looking at these sites that's different from what is available either publicly or through other data providers? Or is it that it's not so much different, it's just more tangible?
I think it's a combination. I think there are things that you see in the field where a lot of sites have been demolished. There have been plans filed 3 and 4 times. The plans have been rejected. You know, what's happening there? You want to look into it. As a broker, we're looking for opportunities. So it's nice to know what's under construction, but we want to know the properties that were to be built that are not being built and why. We want to talk to the folks who own sites that clearly, based on their size and based on their max density, the existing building can't possibly be producing enough revenue to justify not selling. So we're looking at those opportunities, but I think the field work is something much more tangible than just looking through city records and, you know, looking at an address and not really getting a sense of scale, size, scope, what's happening. And it's also very interesting, I think, looking at the map and seeing everything laid out rather than just a list of data, but actually seeing a visual representation of it. And folks have said to me, Bob, why don't you digitize this map? And I said, because looking at it on a computer screen, it will lose something. When folks come into the map room, it's almost like sensory overload. You have all this data, and you can see everything, and there are things that just pop off the map when you look at it. And it's really, you know, the reaction that clients have had has been great. People come in, before you know it, an hour and a half, 2 hours have gone by, and we're talking about different transactions and developments and neighborhoods, and we're always, the highlighters are always working when folks come in, because we're always learning something new and adding to the map.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. When I was a broker, I was at Grubb & Ellis, but all the firms had these big maps that they would print. I don't know if they still print maps, you know, just the generic map of the city, you know, with the layout of the submarkets that we had for the firm and some various color coding, but not at this kind of scale or granularity that you have. But I had it pasted up behind my desk, and I would just reference it all the time. In fact, I then brought one of those maps with me when we started CompStak. I put it on the wall of our first office because there is something very tangible and just like the quick ability to reference that kind of information in a visual way like that.
Right.
It adds a lot of value. what you did, that process of going through the city and looking at every property, you effectively made all of New York City your territory. At Massey Knakal, you pioneered this territory system where everybody had to understand the ins and outs of their neighborhood, right, their territory. But when we chatted before, you spoke a little bit about the fact that you changed your mentality on the territory system a bit. I'd love for you to share a little more on that, how you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think, at Massey Knakal, we created a very distinct competitive advantage with this territory approach. And it really came out of a realization that the real estate business really is not as much about real estate as it is about information and relationships. So we said, how do you get great information? And back, in the 80s when we started, the publicly available information was very, very opaque. What was available was highly inaccurate. So we had our folks dig into their neighborhoods and get to know everything that was making that neighborhood tick. And we would talk to owners, we'd talk to tenants, we'd talk to the mailman. If we couldn't get ownership information, we'd call up a tenant and say, hey, we're Joe from the fire department. You got some really bad fire violations. I got to talk to the owner right away. And we'd always, 90% of the time we'd get the ownership information. So you did what you had to do, but having that knowledge of the neighborhood was a way that we specialized, and that specialization was a way to differentiate ourselves from other brokers, and that differentiation created a competitive advantage. Today, I think because publicly available information is so voluminous and so highly accurate, that the geographic orientation is not nearly as important as product specialization is. So I think you focus on one product type, then as a broker, you have two main assets, your knowledge and your time. You're always trying to increase your knowledge base, but you can't make more time, so you have to use time more effectively. So if last week I sold a retail property, an apartment building, and an office building, and this week I'm pitching an office building, that owner wants to hear everything about the office building I sold last week. Couldn't care less about the apartment building or the retail property. And so 2/3 of the time I spent closing deals last week is not helping me this week. But if I had sold 3 office buildings last week, and everything I did last week is helping me get this week's assignment, that's the way you effectively create time, use your time better, and I think that is a more effective way to implement the brokerage business today as opposed to geographically. Now, I think there needs to be a geographic parameter set on top of the product specialization, but the product specialization is more important than the geography today.
Is there an extreme by which you think someone who has a very strong product specialization can be doing deals throughout the country? Or do you think, what's the level of granularity of geography that you need to focus in on when you think about that overlay?
Well, I will say, I'm sharing with you what has worked for me. A lot of brokers do stuff all over the place and are very successful. I just think, I never want to be in a meeting with a client guessing or pretending to be the expert.
Sure.
You can't know everything about everywhere. Look, in Manhattan, in New York City, forgetting about Staten Island, and no disrespect to Staten Island, but it operates more like New Jersey than New York. In the 4 boroughs, there are 176,000 investment properties. There are 480 neighborhoods. No one person can possibly know everything about all those neighborhoods. So how are you going to deliver a great quality execution to your client if you're not really an expert? And so, can you do a deal in Milwaukee? Maybe you get to know a little bit about it, but are you really an expert in Milwaukee? And then you're in Idaho, and then you're in Miami. I think it's very, very challenging to do that unless you had boots on the ground to really understand the market. So I think having the product specialization, but within a geographic setting, is the way to go.
What's more important, understanding the data or the relationships?
Combination. I think it's hard to have better than a superficial relationship with someone unless they know that you know what you're talking about. So I think, you know, the number one way most brokers prospect is by making prospecting calls. We always say you have to offer something of value when you make that call. That something of value is often market information. It's, you know, tell me about the neighborhood. Most frequently asked question a broker gets is, how's the market? 99.9% of brokers answer that question with adjectives. I say answer with statistics. In order to answer with statistics, you have to know how many buildings are in the market, how many sell each year, whether that percentage is going up or down, what the average prices are, the cap rates, all of that stuff. So I think the command of the data puts you in a position to have a very, very deep relationship with someone. And I think you can have a superficial relationship without the data, but if you really want to establish trust with a potential client, you have to be able to articulate the data about your market very, very well.
So with your new firm, you are taking an AI-centric approach to data. What does that mean for you?
Well, we're using AI in 3 ways. And, you know, I will tell you, I'm the least technologically savvy person in the world, probably. I'm happy my cell phone goes on in the morning. But a big fan of Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan's books, and one of them is Who Not How. So when I said, hey, I better get on this AI trail before somebody else, you know, gets on and eats my lunch, I hired Seth Samowitz to be my AI guy. Seth is an AI expert. And so we're using AI in 3 ways. We're using it, one, on the prospecting front. And the most remarkable thing there is the speed with which everything is happening. The new, cool, great thing that came out 2 months ago that we thought was the greatest thing ever is being replaced today with something that's bigger, faster, stronger, and the old thing is an antique already. So we're using it on the prospecting front, we're using it on the deal execution front, and then we're also using it on data interpretation. And data interpretation is where I think AI has the most potential to be extraordinarily powerful, but it's going to be the most difficult for the industry to use based on the data sets that exist in the market, which for the most part are not very good.
Well, that's a good point. You know, I think, you know, when we think about AI here at CompStak, and when people have asked me, you know, what do we think about the impact of AI, you know, in our business, my feedback has been, or you know, I think will be for the foreseeable future, that the technology is phenomenal. It is game changing. There's been a lot of new technologies that have come along since we started the company that we couldn't quite rationalize why we should be incorporating them into our business. Why does CompStak need to be on the blockchain? The answer is it doesn't, right? You know, or you know, should we do an ICO or an NFT, or you know, what other related information doesn't necessarily make sense, but AI obviously makes sense, and AI works with data. But my feedback has been that, you know, the insights you get from the AI is, to your point, is only as good as the data underlying it. And so we feel great to be in this market because we have unique proprietary data that nobody else has, and so we can do more with that data via AI than anybody else can. You obviously have been in the data business, you know, in building these maps and gathering this information. How do you think about getting the data that you've collected into models to have a unique advantage? Because really, at the end of the day, the data is what drives the advantage.
Yeah, you know, it's something we're really, really excited about, because we think that if the theory of AI will actually work in practice, the models that we're creating should be able to give us predictive measures of what's going to happen. And then anybody can tell you what has happened, but to be able to tell what's going to happen can really be groundbreaking. And fortunately, you know, we have data sets that are 40 years old. The methodology for calculating the data has been the same for 40 years. So there's a high level of integrity in that data. And I always say, you know, it's not the absolute numbers that matter, it's the relationship between the numbers that matter. If I tell you that in 2019, there was 26.3 billion of sales volume in Manhattan, you really don't know what to think about that. Unless I tell you that in 2015, at the peak of the market, it was $57.4 billion, and in 2020, the height of COVID, it was $11.1 billion, then all of a sudden, the 26.3 starts to have some feel to it. In the same way, it's really not the absolute numbers that matter, but it's the relationship between the numbers. Are the numbers going up? Are they going down? What's the magnitude of the up, the magnitude of the down? And if the methodology for calculating the data has not been consistent, the integrity between those relationships loses something. So we're really excited about what predictive things might come out. We're taking our land study and comparing the fluctuations in land values to things that you would expect. Residential rents, condo pricing, office rents, office occupancy, all those things. But then we're also layering on a bunch of macroeconomic things. Interest rates, lending rates, inflation, S&P 500, Dow Jones, price of gold, price of oil, consumer sentiment. And who knows, the models should be able to say, well, when interest rates drop 75 basis points and the price of eggs go up 15%, you're going to see a shift in the hotel land market.
Fair enough. I think, for years we've met with and worked with various companies in the AI space, and I think that many people who come at this and are trying to use AI in modeling and forecasting within commercial real estate come at it from a techie perspective of like, oh, let me see what kind of cool data sets I can pull in to arrive at a forecast. But they don't necessarily understand the nuts and bolts of commercial real estate, right? And so they're trying to figure out how the price of eggs impacts the value of real estate without taking into account the fundamentals, like the rents or the prevailing cap rates that have been used in the market. The price per square foot that typically is in that market.
Right, and then understanding what really are the pushes and pulls that make these things go in different directions. Like we thought about looking at it, we have the data not only on values fluctuating, but the volume of transactions and what's likely to be a push and pull there. And we found over the years that tax policy is highly, highly correlated to the fluctuations in the market. And in fact, if you look, one of the things I find interesting is that our policymakers today are really making it much worse than everything needs to be. But they don't use common sense a lot of time. In fact, with the whole conversation about the new 485X and the Affordable New York, 421A, these tax abatement programs, a lot of politicians are saying, well, you know what, it's just a free giveaway to developers. We don't need to do that to have development happen. And my answer is, well, in the last year of the 421A program, in Manhattan, south of 96th Street, there was 1.6 million buildable feet of residential rental sites sold. 2 years later, 38,000 feet. Last year of Affordable New York, 1.5 million buildable feet of residential land sold. 2 years later, 68,000 feet. So the numbers don't lie. It's very clear that you need these tax abatements in order to stimulate development and create supply. But these are all things that are being baked into the model, so it is a very technical, analytical approach, but we're layering on the common sense and looking at the factors within the industry that will impact them.
Exactly. I think that's the key thing, right? Is you need to layer the fundamentals, and then once you've nailed down the fundamentals, then you can layer in these alternative data sets and get the really interesting insights from them. But without the fundamentals, those alternative data sets can give you maybe some weird outcomes.
Right.
Would love to take it a little bit of a different angle, and wanted to ask you about your baseball card. Tell us a little bit about where the baseball card came from.
Sure. Well, the baseball card actually started just as a goof. I have a client who I've done several deals with over the years. Hadn't transacted with him for about 6 or 7 years. And I see the guy, we're both on the executive committee of the Real Estate Board of New York, so I see him every month at the executive committee luncheons. And when I see him at the luncheons, it generally be, hey, how are the kids? how's the wife, how's the boat, you know, that kind of thing. And I ran into him on Park Avenue one day. And we just started talking about business. And I said to him, hey, Hal, what are you doing with the big site in Long Island City? He's like, oh, yeah, well, you know, I'm going to be in the market looking for a construction loan soon. I want to build it. And I said, you should talk to our mortgage guys. We've done a lot of construction loans recently, and, you know, they're really good. And he said, oh, thanks, Bob, but I'm going to go with JLL. I said, Hal, I've been at JLL for 4 years. He said, oh, yeah, I forgot. I thought you were still at Cushman & Wakefield. So I said, you know, how do I tell this guy, or, you know, convey where I am? You know, there's a lot of movement in the brokerage business. And as a kid, I collected baseball cards. I loved baseball cards. And I was a kid who always looked more at the back of the card than the front of the card. And I said, you know what, I want to put together a baseball card and send it to him with all my, you know, where I was, all the different years, and just put one together. I was just going to send it to him. And the guys in the office were like, hey, BK, this is the coolest thing we've ever seen. You know, you got to do a lot of these. And one thing led to the other, and I'm on version 4 now. And I've probably autographed 25,000 of these things. And it kind of went viral on social media, and it's been a neat thing. So it's kind of a unique marketing approach that started as just a goof and turned into something.
I told Bob that I wanted him to sign a rookie card for me, because I don't want one of these 25,000 cards that everybody else has. I want something of a limited edition variety, so that I've got appropriate resale value on it.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah. But, so we alluded to the fact that you stumbled into brokerage accidentally. I think it's a funny story. Maybe you could recall for us how that happened.
Sure. I'll take you back to 1981. A freshman at the Wharton School, and like every other Wharton kid, I wanted to be the next Gordon Gekko and take over Wall Street. So I said, you know, if I want to get in this investment banking thing, I have to get a summer job that's going to look good on the resume. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, made up a resume. And during spring break, I'm driving around dropping it off at every commercial bank and investment bank I saw. I'm in Hackensack. I came out of a Payne Weber office across the hall. I see Coldwell Banker. So I'm like, oh, great, another bank. So I go in, give them my resume. They called me later that afternoon and said, hey, we'd like to interview you tomorrow for a summer job. Set up the interview. Again, 1981, no internet. So I go to the library that morning to look up this bank, and I see it's a real estate company. I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to get into real estate. But they were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. Took the job, loved it right away. It was a great office, a lot of young, hardworking people. Seemed like they were having fun, they were happy, they were making a lot of money. And I absolutely loved it. First summer, I was in their data bank market research program, driving around Morris County, logging information on all the commercial buildings I saw. And then I went back my next summer, ran that summer internship program. And my third summer, I actually got my Jersey salesperson's license and was an assistant to an industrial broker, Tom Mulaney, who I'm still friends with to this day. And I was showing space to industrial tenants. And then when I got out of school in '84, I started with CV here in New York. But it was a complete accident that I got into real estate.
Thank you very much. It's been fun.
Yeah, Michael, this was great.
Thank you.